Welcome to another AVID chat. David Harple and Jack Arnold. Jack, good to see you on actually a Friday today.
Yes, it's good to see you. We're coming into 4th of July weekend. Obviously, this is not going to come. This will come out after the 4th, but yeah, 4th of July weekend's coming up. Pumped about that.
Yep, it's going to be nice. Trying to take some time off, so we're squeezing in a little chat here before we hit the holidays. If you're joining us today, we have a topic that we seem to talk about all the time, not just Jack and myself, but amongst friends and family. And it's really about real estate. We did one about 8 months ago on should I refinance my house? And today's topic is, should I sell my house? The environment is still pretty crazy in terms of things are going on the market and selling quick. Prices appear to be pretty high. We'll talk a little bit about that. Rates are still low. So there's so many variables to this question. But really at the stem of it, we think there's some deeper meaning and questions too. Should I sell my house, Jack?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend.
I knew you were going to say that, by the way.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting question, actually. I think it's one of those things where, I think people have somewhat internalized. I mean, almost everybody's going to be listening to this remembers, it wasn't that long ago there was a financial crisis essentially predicated by housing prices being
market.
So expensive. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, and that really wasn't that long ago. It's certainly a fresh memory for a lot of us. So I think there is a little bit of, I don't know if concern's the right word, but I think there's a little bit of, I think that we've kind of internalized, I've got a lot of assets, if I own a house, tied up in the equity of my house. Is there something I should be doing to, maybe unlock that or put it to better use? Because who's to say that that's a permanent state of affairs? They could always go down. And I think that's an interesting question. What, is there something productive, or are there things you could do to make better use or to make any use of the equity that's in your house versus just having it there? I don't know that there's a real definitive answer, yes or no. I think it does depend on your individual situation, what you're trying to accomplish. But I don't think it's something to ignore. Something like the majority of people's net worth in this country is in the equity of their house. It'd be silly to ignore it as if it's nothing.
So I think that's an interesting point to hone in on a little bit before we get into, maybe what are some options to do with it. Is the psychology behind that is, if you own a home and let's say you've own it for whether it's 5 years and you've watched prices just go up, that's me in my category currently in my house. Or maybe you've been a homeowner for 20 or 30 years and you've watched the prices go kind of all over the place, peaking, as Jack mentioned, probably 06, first part of 07 before the financial crisis really started to hit, and then bottom fell out on real estate prices. Maybe you're dumb lucky like me and happened to buy, and now you've seen things go back up. So what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that subconsciously we're thinking, my value of my home is considerably more than my mortgage, and it represents quite a bit of my overall net worth, the things that I own versus what I owe. Maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should capitalize on this market. That's what I'm hearing you say, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm assuming that's some of the thought process is, it's gone really well. I think everybody would, it'd be hard to not agree that the housing market is pretty hot. I mean, I think everybody's heard the stories of bidding wars. It seems like everywhere. It's not localized to one particular place. It's, you're getting all cash offers and, thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands above asking, depending on where you are. I think it'd be tough to argue that it's not a really, kind of a seller's market nowadays. But I do think that it's an interesting question. I think, as we've always said, it's more, if you look at the landscape, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. What tools do I have at my disposal to allow me to accomplish these things? And like I said, most Americans, the majority of their net worth is wrapped up in the equity of their house. I guess arguing whether that's good or not is maybe for another video or something, but it's true. It certainly is true. So accessing that, or what to do about it to access it, I think is an interesting question. And there's a number of ways that you can get it. One of which is to sell it, of course. I mean, then you'd have access to it. There's pros and cons to doing that. So as you know, I mean, you sell it, one, you got to go somewhere. So you have to live somewhere.
Right.
So it's selling this to go, and where am I going to go? The cost to selling it, it's not cheap, I guess, to get the money out of the house. If you sell it, I'm assuming you pay a 6% to get it out.
Yep.
Maybe it's a kind of a pain to do it there's some closing costs. So it's not inexpensive to get that out of your house. I mean, that's probably the most straightforward way.
Well, and you still have to live somewhere. So you're still going to have some sort of expense, which we've talked about this before. I think it's, some of the tactical sides are, well, rates are great, so we should do this. And, anybody can jump online and you could get a $400,000 mortgage for 3%. Your payment's probably $1,700 principal and interest. And a lot of times our first reaction is comparing that to either like renting or something else, but you forget all the other components to owning the home: taxes, insurance, maintenance, all of those things.
Well, yeah, sure. It's if you're going to leave one place and go to another place, you definitely would have to see, like, I just don't know that it's a great idea in particular I don't like treating it just as a trade, I guess. Like, I don't know that you should sell it. I wouldn't say that you should do it as part of like an investment account. Trying to time it.
Not time the market. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like trying to do this thing where, well, I'll sell and then I'll rent for a little while, and then when it falls, then I'll buy back. I just think that unless you're just like phenomenally lucky, that's going to be very difficult to do. Probably even more difficult than if you were doing it in the stock market. One, because it's not as liquid. If you want to sell your stock, you sell them today and then buy them back tomorrow for all, It's very easy to do. It's just not that easy to do when you're talking about real estate. I think my personal opinion is that idea, selling, trying to time this whole real estate market thing, is just a loser's game. I wouldn't fool with that. That's not to say it isn't a financial asset that does have. How can it work into what you're trying to accomplish? No doubt that should be considered.
So then let's talk a little bit about what are some other ways to get the equity out of your home. And one that comes to mind, which might be the simplest, maybe quickest and least expensive, would be to take out what's called a home equity line of credit, which essentially most banks do. They look at the value of your home, what you own, there's a difference, and they normally give you somewhere around 60 to 80% of that equity as a kind of line of credit. So it's an open checkbook. They charge a rate, and you could write a check for 50 grand or whatever the equity is, and then do something else with that. That would be an option. Yeah. It's not free. There's closing costs to it, and rates today on a home equity line of credit are probably, 4% is my guess, maybe 5%. So that'd be one way.
That's one way. For sure. Depending on the situation, if you're an older person and you've lived in a house for a long time, you've got, who knows, got maybe gobs of equity in your house, but you don't want to sell it. You don't want to move. I mean, you could always do a reverse mortgage, which is like they have a pretty, I think my perception is they have a bad reputation.
For sure.
I don't know that.
Yeah, they're
I
like
don't know
a
that
scamming tool to retirees. I've heard that. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's more the people that are pushing them sometimes. I think it's legit though. I mean, I wouldn't say rush out and get one. I think it is a legit tool though, depending on how you use it. I mean, we can go to some of the details, but it is a way to get it out that you wouldn't have to move. You don't owe a payment, which is nice. You can get access to the equity and you don't owe anything. Depending on your situation, if you have kids you want to inherit the house, not that eliminates that. They could always refinance it and pay the loan back. But that's another way. If you're older, of course, if you're 35, you can't do this, but I think you got to be 65 and older. 62. But it is an option. To utilize for sure. And there's, depending again on your situation, whether or not you take a lump sum or you do it every month or you just it's kind of like a reverse home equity line of credit. You can basically we can just kind of use it as you would see fit. It's definitely an option. But I will say, any of these things, what's the point? You know, if you're gonna, let's say, refi your house and take out $100,000 in equity, what is that for? And just to be clear on what you're actually doing with that money, for sure.
Right. Well, real quick on the reverse mortgage, I believe when that happens is you essentially have a note. You owe however much money they gave you, the company, you own that on the value. And when that comes due is upon the sale of the property.
Right.
So if your property, let's make up a quick numbers real quick. Your home's worth $400,000. You do a reverse mortgage for $350,000. That's yours to spend however you do it. And then upon your demise, if you will, the house needs to be sold to pay back the $350,000. If it's still worth $400,000, well, fine. But if it's worth $250,000, somebody, your estate, I guess, would owe the difference, right?
No, I mean, if it's worth less, then that's on them. They're taking the risk
really?
on whoever. Yeah. Whoever. Yeah. So it's not on you, which is, I mean,
I'm dead.
it's nice.
Not on me, but wouldn't it be if you're my heir?
Nope.
The estate?
Nope. I mean, they would assume ownership of the house. So, I mean, whoever issued the mortgage company, I guess you'd say, they would take ownership of the house. But if there was a $300,000 reverse mortgage, let's say, and they could only sell for $200,000, well, I guess it didn't work out for them. That's
but
how
they
it
own
worked.
The property. Yeah.
They own
I
the
guess
property.
That's,
yes.
Right. In the other scenario, you could pay off what you owed them and keep the property, so to speak.
That's right. So if it was worth $1 million and there was a $300,000 reverse mortgage on it, yes, your heirs in some sense could refi or pay you back and keep the house. So it's not as if it's like you die, that's that, it's over with. It doesn't work like that. Like you can while you're alive. If you got a reverse mortgage and 10 years into it, I don't know, you don't need the money or whatever, and there's $100,000 on it, you could refinance it and pay off the reverse mortgage too. Yep. The good thing about the reverse mortgage thing is it's a way to access the equity in your house without having to sell it, and you don't have a payment. That's the big thing, is you don't, it's not like you don't owe the money back until you pass. It kind of pushes off you have to pay it, the liability of paying it back until you die or some point down the road. So it is a way to access it. For sure.
So that's an option.
Home equity line of credit, like a reverse mortgage, I suppose. You could sell it. You could just outright refinance it, get a new mortgage, I suppose. And those are probably the biggest ways you can do it. I'm sure there's other ways you could think of.
If you refinance it, and let's say, this is pretty big, cash out refinance. So you refinance, you take out a larger loan, rates are super low. So in some scenarios, depending on your current rate and term and all these variables, you could take more money out than your current mortgage and have a lower monthly payment, so to speak. You're then left with a chunk of money. What you do with it, I think you're kind of going down this road earlier, is now that's a whole nother scenario. Am I using it to remodel the house, to improve maybe quality of the current home? Am I going to reinvest it into something else, a business, the markets? I don't know. There's, I guess, a ton of options there.
Right. Listen, I'm going to say, if you're going to borrow more money, try not to borrow money to spend money, I guess, But, you could do whatever you want to do, but I think you'd want to think it through before you actually did it. This is like, if you go back to the should you refi your house thing, I don't know that this is one of the things you should do just because. Like, it has to be some kind of thought, like, because you think, well, rates, we talked before about rates are low, therefore refinance. I just think that's too surface level. I think there's more to it than that. And the idea of taking equity out of your house, however you would do that, sell it or otherwise, there has to be a few layers down of what is the point? Why even do that? Where does that leave me? What do things look like if I do that? What's the scenario? And how does that align with, kind of my degree one type thing? How does that line up with my values? How is that getting me closer to the things that are important to me? Or is it not? A lot of times it just comes down on the side of, no, I'm good. Like, nothing, I'm not going to do this. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do this. But, sometimes it does. If you have a ton of like deferred maintenance on your home, or you need a roof, or I don't know what it would be. Could be any number of things. Maybe it makes sense to do that now. If your AC is on its last leg, or your house is
Roof is a great
19 years
example.
old or something, like, maybe it's, and you're still going to be there for a while, maybe it makes sense to do that.
Right before I hopped on this call, this chat, they knock at the door, and it was somebody pitching free quotes for windows, right? So we have some newer windows, but we have some of the original windows, and bad timing for him. But you bring up a great point, and Melissa and I have had this conversation, the exact same conversation about home value and equity in here, and what do we do, and it ended up coming back to what's our vision of our ideal life and our family life, and what do we want to do? For us, it just makes sense to stay put. It's great to see the number on Zillow, but windows would be a great thing. Maybe that's something eventually it's going to need done, probably in my lifetime if I'm not going anywhere. So yeah, maybe you give thought to that now, spending the money, enjoying a new roof that I think people put off until it's rain's coming in the ceiling, which is never fun. Right. And that could play a role too.
Yeah. I think in general, it's one of those things where it is an asset. It's something to be considered, but it's just a tool in the toolbox of things to do. And the ultimate thing of what you're trying to figure out is, here's the things I'm trying to accomplish and the things that are important, and kind of my more or less North Star. This is what I'm trying to do. What tools do I have at my disposal? And the equity in your house is definitely one of those, but it's not the only one. And there, you got to be a little bit careful of, it seems like it's kind of free money, magic money, yes, where it just comes out and it doesn't cost anything, or it costs very little, which of course is not true. I mean, you're still spending the money. You could always, yep, if you take $100,000 out and you spend it on A, I mean, you're not spending it on B. You just need to know that, which is more important, A or B, and be clear on that.
Right. I think it's a great way to end it. Should you sell your house? I don't know. Let's start with what are you trying to accomplish, and then talk through how these tactics might actually help those things. And maybe the answer is yes, you should. And maybe you'll come to the conclusion that, you know what? No, it's not. It's good to talk about what we've gone through the exercises, and I think we'll just stay put. So if you want to talk further about it, learn more about this tactics or any of the details that we can share with you, feel free to reach out.
All right, cool. See you, Dave.
See ya.